All right, we are live. What's going on, Sumolings? We'll give you guys a minute to join us. We have Mike here from Podcastco. Get started in just a sec. What's up, Scott? Stefan, how are you guys doing? All right, let us know in the comments where you guys are tuning in from. We're going to get started in just a second. Awesome. Mike, where are you at?
So physically, geographically, you mean?
Yeah, and mentally, why not?
Okay, so so we're based in Manchester in the UK, so in the north of England.
Very nice, awesome. How's the weather treating you guys?
It's a bit brutal at the moment. I'll be completely honest. Yeah, it's
I'm sorry to hear that.
There's like English weather, and then there's Manchester weather.
Ooh, that's tough.
It's probably about as much rainfall as like Seattle here, basically.
Damn, that's
a very wet city.
Well, I'm holding down the nice sunny day in Austin, Texas. It's gonna be like 85 degrees today, so we'll see. Unfortunately, we can't share that over the webinar, but cool. Yeah. Let's go. We got some folks in here. We'll get started. So happy Monday to everybody. We got a great webinar for you today. Like I said, we're joined with Mike from Podcastco. Podcastco is a platform where you can record, upload, and distribute your shows in one place without the technical hassles. It's starting off at just $79 on AppSumo right now. Super cool tool. We're going to dive into it in just a minute. Couple of housekeeping things before we get going. One, Black Friday early access for AppSumo started last night for Briefcase and Plus members. So if any of you are Briefcase and Plus members, you can hop on over to AppSumo and start taking advantage of all of those deals, as well as Podcastco. If you're not a member, you can join Plus on appsumo.com/plus. Two other pieces. One, we will be sending out a replay of this webinar. So if you guys miss anything, you got to hop out early for any reason, don't worry, we got you taken care of. We'll send that over to you. And lastly, if you have any questions while we're going through this walkthrough with Mike, feel free to drop those in the Q&A box, and we'll circle back to those towards the end of the webinar to get your questions answered. That is all I have for now. Mike, I will turn it over to you if you want to give these good Sumolings a walkthrough and kind of show them the tips and tricks.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Chris.
Yeah, and I'm going to turn off my video as well.
Cool. Hola, Sumolings. It's nice to meet you all. So, like Chris said, we run Podcastco. We're a hosting platform. We make getting your podcast launched and out to the biggest audience possible as easy as it can be. So we help you get your podcast out into all the directories, and we have a whole load of other bunch of tools and handy things that you guys can get access to. So as Chris was saying, if you guys have any questions, just ping them over. But like, even if it's just general podcasting questions, feel free to send them over to me as well. So I know a lot of people are thinking about starting their podcasts and they may not have launched them yet. So if you've got any questions, not just technical stuff about the platform, if you've got stuff about how you do certain podcasting things, then feel free to fire those over as well, and I will try and answer all of those for you. So let's jump into it. So I'll do a screen share. If you bear with me one moment, I am just going to flip it over. Are we already screen sharing? I believe we are.
Yes, I got you.
Yeah, it's working already, yeah?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, right. So let's just start. So basically, once you've signed up and you've got your details from AppSumo, they'll give you a link that will send you to studio.podcastco/signup/AppSumo. So don't try and sign up on the normal sign up page, because you won't be able to access your deal. Like, if you do that by mistake, it's not a problem. Then just drop us an email at drop us an email at appsumo@podcast.co. And that way you'll come into the right inbox. You'll go to the right person. Laura will pick it up. And then if you have signed up on the wrong, like on the normal sign up flow, then just message that email and Laura will sort it out and switch your account over for you, so you can get access to the right area. So to get started, you basically hit this form, add your name, surname, add your email. I'm going to go with Mike at podcast.co. So now you need to pick a password. So obviously pick something that you're going to remember. So for the sake of this, I'm going to go with something incredibly secure, which is that. Then next is you need to choose your network name. So this is what the account that your podcast is going to live under. So you have your network, and then you have your podcast, which is like your show underneath your network. So, you know, this can be anything. It can be your business, it could be your agency, it could just be your name. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, give it a name. So we'll call it Mike's Network. And then here you add your promo codes. So you add your first promo code in here. If you've bought more than one code and you need to stack them, then you add your second and third codes in here below. And then once you've done that, you just have to click create my account. And then what will happen is you'll get an email with an activation link in. So you go to your email, click the activation link, and then you will hit the proper sign-in form. You'll be able to add your email and the password you just selected, which is our Mike@Podcastco, and our very secure password of password123. And then once you're logged in, you will hit this page. So when you first come into Podcastco, there's two options. You can either import an existing podcast. Here, it's really easy to do. It's literally, you just come in, you just click that, and then you add your RSS feed in there. And then what we'll do is we'll pull everything in and reorganize it and generate your new RSS for you. Now, alternatively, if you haven't already got a podcast, then you can create a new podcast. So we'll go on, we'll do that now quickly. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay, so podcast name. So we're going to call this something really obvious like Mike's Podcast. And then the next step is to pick a category. Now, the way the categories work, they sort of modeled off how Apple do categories. So Apple have recently changed their categories just this summer, actually. It wasn't long ago at all. So the traditional categories they had been the same since, you know, they first started hosting podcasts on the App Store, which was what, a long time ago now. Like, I don't know the exact date, but it's, you know, certainly like kind of mid-noughties, early noughties kind of time. So at that point, those categories hadn't changed for a very long time. And now they've just released a whole load of new categories. So it's actually a lot more granular and it's a lot more useful for people. As obviously the categories were kind of outdated. So you have a top level category, and then within categories, you have these sub-level categories. So this is actually quite important. Actually, this is, before we even go into the application, this is something that is important. Like, people don't often think about the categories, but if you're launching a podcast, picking the right category is really important, because it's actually pretty easy to get to the top of certain categories. So you're slap bang there on the front of Apple's, you know, the Apple homepage, rather than kind of being hidden away kind of down at the bottom of there. So yeah, so I would recommend having a think about what categories you actually pick for your podcast. It is worth spending a bit of time thinking about it, because yeah, you can definitely game them a little bit and get yourselves higher, which will obviously give your podcast better rankings, you know, so you'll shoot up the charts and it'll be better for you. So for the sake of this, what are we going to use? We're going to go with business. And now within business, we're going to go with marketing. Now you can pick multiple categories, but what you kind of need to remember is after the first 3 categories you pick, most platforms disregard anything you select after that. So it's really just the first 3 that you pick that are the most important. So we'll say marketing business, marketing education courses, and I will pick a third category of there's a lot of categories, by the way, as you can see. I'll just scroll through them all here so you can see them all. And we'll go with a third category of tech news. So we've picked our categories now. Next step is you've got to select your language. So, you know, most people, I imagine, signing up probably going to be doing English language podcasts. So you select the language that's relevant to your podcast, and then you add your podcast description in. So I have a podcast description that I prepared. So there we go. We've now got our description in here. Now, again, your description is actually important. So if you think about things, you know, wherever you put this podcast, it has this metadata. It's all, you know, it's all there in the, you know, in the player and stuff. So, you know, you need to get your descriptions right, because ultimately, you know, Google's search engines, they are reading your descriptions. So it's important to sort of word it well and format it well, in my opinion. You have up to 4,000 characters, so you can obviously go into a lot more detail than I have here. And then you can also format these. A lot of the platforms will just disregard the formatting. And it will just, you know, it will just basically spit out a load of copy. So sometimes you have to go in and manually sort of format them on certain platforms. But overall, we try and pass over the formatting to the different directories. So when we take your podcast and inject your podcast into X, Y, or Z directory, we more often than not, we often work with the platforms themselves. So we pass the formatting over, so you don't actually have to go to the hassle of reformatting it every time. And then you click go. And next, what you're going to do is you're going to choose your podcast link. So this is where your podcast is going to live. So everyone that signs up on Podcastco gets a landing page automatically generated for their podcast. So we'll have a look at what that looks like in a bit. We'll set it up, and then we'll look at the kind of the page itself. But until then, at this point, all you really need to do is just pick something that's memorable or relevant to your podcast. And it's going to hang off pod.co. So it's really easy to remember, and it's really easy to share. So we click next. Then we're going to upload our podcast artwork. Okay, so I have mine here. And you can zoom it in and out. The formatting for the artwork, it doesn't actually list it on here, but if you go to help.podcast.co, if you're not sure on your dimensions, all of the dimensions for all of the kind of artwork types you might need are included in there. So that'll be your podcast artwork, it'll be any episode artwork, and it'll be your landing page artwork dimensions. So once you've got your artwork uploaded, you can click create podcast. And also, just worth pointing out, if you don't have any artwork at this stage, don't worry about it. Just, you know, you can still create the podcast anyway. So let's click create. Hey, so we're here. So this is my sort of, you know, hub for all my podcasts. So if you've bought multiple codes and you want to create multiple podcasts, you can basically add them in here. You just click add podcast, and then you go back through the same process again. So next. And also, actually, whilst I'm here, I'll show you how, if you've got additional codes, let's say you signed up and you only added the one code in, but you've got 2 more codes that you're going to stack. You click network settings, you go to billing, and you can redeem the rest of your codes there. And then this will, you know, and also you'll see your allowances here. So if you remove a podcast, it'll pop back up here. So at the moment, I'm just showing an allowance of one allowance of 1 podcast, because I've only used 1 code to create this account. And actually, whilst we're in the settings section, you can see this is the help guides, you know, link to the help guides here. It's literally just on help.podcast.co. It's really easy to find. And it's got a lot of guides on there. Pretty much most things that you might want to know will be on there, basically. And then here, whilst we're in here, I'll show you collaborators. So every plan comes with a certain number of collaborators on it. As you stack more code, you get more collaborators. So here, it's really easy to do. It's just like inviting a user into any kind of other platform. You literally just invite your user, add their email address here. So we'll use, I'll use hello@podcast.co. And then you can select the account role. So you can make them an owner, which would give them access to absolutely everything in your account. You could give them admin ownership, which allows them to do pretty much everything as well, but they wouldn't have the sort of billing access page. So they can't sort of mess around with your allowances. So if it's someone that you're kind of just having in occasionally, you might want to get them doing that. And you might want to set them as an admin as opposed to an owner, really. And then the third one is you can limit them to specific podcasts. So any user you invite, if you've got multiple codes that you bought and you want to have, every podcast that you've got, so you've got 2 or 3 podcasts, then you can limit people to these podcasts. And then that is basically manager and content creator. So content creator has a very limited amount of access. So they can't go in there and delete podcasts. So more often than not, probably what you would want to do is limit people to a podcast and then make them a content creator. Unless it's someone that's like a core part of your team. So then when you've selected the roles that you want to give to people, you just click invite, they get the email, and then they just click the activation link in the email. They'll be sent to a page. They'll be able to create a profile. If they've already got a profile, it'll just allow them to access the account and give them access. But in most cases, people won't have profiles already, so they'll have to generate a profile on the page that they get sent to. So next, we're going to go back to Cast Network. So here we are. We're back in Mike's podcast. So we've got our network. Oh, and actually, there's a shortcut to your network settings thinking about it. So you don't even need to go to the drop down here. You just go here. You can kind of ignore the My Account section. This is for people that have kind of personal podcasts, but all AppSumo users, we've created network podcasts, so you have user and multiple podcast functionality. So yeah, so you can pretty much just ignore the actual kind of personal account side of things. So now we're going to go into our podcast and we're going to get things set up. So really easy to do. Come onto this page, you upload your episode here, you can upload it here, or you can just click and drag and drop it straight into the browser. So I'm going to click here. I've got this, which is an episode that we did. So our file's uploading. You can see the progress bar there. This is quite a short file, so it's going to upload very quickly. And then at that point, once you've uploaded your episode, give it a name. So Mike's Awesome Podcast, episode 1. Okay, so we have our episode name. Then we have our description. So just for the sake of it, this is my description. Now, like I said before, I do think it's worth spending a bit of time thinking about your descriptions of your show and of your episodes, because this stuff is important. This is like, how people are finding stuff. Ultimately, this is like, you need to kind of put your SEO cap on, really, when you're doing this kind of stuff, in my opinion. And again, if you want to know, if you want any kind of tips and tricks and, how we do stuff and, how we kind of make sure we set stuff up so it goes as viral as possible, then head on over to podcastco/content, because we have loads of stuff on there that's going to be relevant to you. We have a lot of guides, long form articles that kind of cover in a lot of detail, how you gain an audience, how you grow an audience, how you engage them, and ultimately how you monetize them as well, because this kind of stuff is important. So yeah, so you get your description in, author, that's going to be our podcast network title. Then you can override it if you wanted to, but otherwise it's going to pull Mike's, I think it was called Cast Network actually, wasn't it? Cast Network. So we're going to call it that. And then you can decide whether it is a full episode, a trailer, or a bonus episode. So now, obviously, I think these are kind of relatively straightforward. So your full episode is obviously a full episode. Bonus episode is like bonus content that you might do in between episodes. So let's say like you have one episode going live, but then you have kind of all these awesome, like kind of insightful clips that you got in the episode, but they didn't quite, fit in the episode itself. You can distribute all of that as bonus content, and then you've got your next episode. And another, like a really cool way of thinking about this is like you think about how people use YouTube. So like if you look at I'm guessing most of you guys know Joe Rogan. So if you look at Joe Rogan's podcast channel on his YouTube account, He's got his main channel where he's got all his episodes, which are like, an hour plus long. I don't think I've ever seen a Joe Rogan episode that's less than an hour long. So he's got like his main channel with all of his full episodes on, and then he's got a separate channel with all of his bonus content on. Now, obviously, bonus content's really good way of like kind of engaging an audience. So I definitely, I would recommend in between episodes having these kind of mini bonus episodes. I think that's really useful. And then the third type is a trailer. So obviously, if you've not launched a podcast yet, I would recommend just cutting a trailer. It needs to be like 30 seconds to a minute long, 2 minutes max, just telling people why they need to tune into the podcast, to your podcast, what they're going to get from it, how they can sign up, any CTAs you want to send them to, like head to, mywebsite.com/sign up here and give me your email address and I'll send you like extra content. All that kind of stuff. That's the type of stuff you should be getting into your trailer. It's really useful. If you need sort of background music for your podcast, if you head to podcastco/free music, then there's a whole bunch of audio files that you're able to download for free that we made personally. So we made these ourselves in-house. One of our producers, Tom, made them. And, they're really good quality, actually, and you're welcome to use those. They're kind of royalty-free. There's, it's a free download, so you can go and grab that, and then you've got, like, lots of kind of interstitials and jingles and sweepers and kind of any bits of kind of content that you might need. So, yeah, so for the sake of this, we're going to go with a full episode. Next is your episode number and your season number. Now, obviously, we're just creating this now, but if you already have an episode and then you come to do it again, a lot of this stuff's already populated, essentially. So you kind of just do it the one time and then the system sort of handles it all for you moving forward. And then the last thing is whether this is explicit content. Now, my recommendation here would be, even if your content is slightly explicit, to not click explicit content, because all you're going to really do there is limit your audience, because it's just going to get squished on certain directories like on Apple. Obviously, if it's very explicit content and you don't flag it as explicit content, it's going to get flagged on Apple anyway. But if it's just a few swear words here and there and stuff like that, I wouldn't flag it as explicit personally. This is only like relevant if it's really kind of, like pushing boundaries or just, like really adult kind of content, which most podcasts aren't really. So I would suggest leaving that switch to off personally. And sorry, one last thing. At the moment, the podcast is using our podcast artwork. If you want to override this on an episode by episode basis, you can do. So you can upload a new image here, and then that will override the podcast artwork. So then each episode has different artwork. There's pros and cons to doing this. I think artwork's quite important. I think people, certainly on a lot of the platforms, it is kind of important because your artwork, you see the artwork before the title a lot of the time. So I think you should try and, grab people's attention with your artwork. And I think if it's an interview-based kind of podcast, then often just, using photograph of whoever you're interviewing and stuff, it's relevant. You don't want to be creating new artwork every time just for an episode. So you can just continue to pull your episode art, your show artwork if you don't want to continue doing that. So then we click next. So now we need to decide how we want to publish this episode. So public means it's published on your podcast and can be seen by everyone. So this will, once you've kind of been through the submissions process, which we'll come to in a moment, selecting public would mean that your episode will most likely be live. On some directories, it'll go live straight away, like Spotify, it'll be in an hour. Apple Podcasts will be anywhere between 12 hours and maybe like 48 hours, I would say. And it all just depends, because obviously all the directories work a bit differently. They all pull the episodes, they're normally within a 24-hour time frame, but like I said, you know, some people like Spotify do it a lot quicker. So they'll just be pulling stuff constantly. So the minute you publish an episode and put an episode public, it's going to go live on a platform like Spotify. But yeah, it's going to take a little bit longer for some other platforms. And I'll take you through exactly every platform we send your podcast to in a moment. Next, you can choose to have it scheduled. And then you have some suggestions. So either tomorrow, 7 days from now, they're the most common that we find that people use, or you can select your date for any time in the future. So let's set this for Christmas Day. Woo! For 12 a.m. Make it 12 p.m. Christmas Day. So that's when our episode's going to go live. And then lastly, you've got unlisted. So unlisted is useful if you wanted to create a private podcast. So I'm not going to take you through private podcast creation right now, but if you are interested in having a private podcast that is just for either your employees or a select group of clients or something like that, then just head to help.podcastco and put private podcast in, and that will explain how to create a private podcast network, a private network within your podcast network. So then bang, we'll schedule that episode. Hooray. So at the moment, it's not showing there, but it will show here. And then on the episode, we can click share. This is your embed. So you can copy this and take this player and embed it straight into your website. So it's going to look just like this. It's going to have downloads, it's got share functionality, and it's got the RSS functionality. And yeah, so they look pretty cool. They're really nice little players. There's an iframe embed there if you prefer. And then that is if you want to share your actual page. So that's your direct link if you want to stick it in social media. Going back to the player, if you want to share this straight onto Twitter, you can do. The embeds work on Twitter, so you can pretty much post them in most places and they'll be okay. And so yeah, so that's that. And then I'm just going to close this momentarily. And then this is your episode analytics. So this is, obviously we have no analytics here for the current. You've got this week, this month, last 30 days, last 7 days. This is the kind of common stuff. You've got your breakdown between your total and your unique listeners. It's obviously not going to show anything right now. It's going to show all of your locations. This is going to show all the different kind of clients. So you can see what's working best for you in your podcast. Next, you can choose to delete, move to unlisted, or published if you wanted to override those settings that we've just done. And lastly, if you need to edit any of the stuff, you can do, and then you just click update and that will update. And this is going to show you all of your, and so these are not going to obviously load any analytics now because this is a completely new episode that I've just uploaded. But again, you've got your this week, this month, last 30 days, last 7 days, common stuff. You break down between your unique and your totals. You've got your top clients, your top locations, and your most popular episodes. This stuff's really useful. You can see what's working for you. And we're working on some pretty cool stats stuff, actually, that's going to be getting released. You know, we're going to be kind of evolving stats as we kind of move forward because there's a lot to kind of be done with stats in the podcasting industry in general. So next are our settings. So these are the settings that we originally created when we put our description in, we put our categories, our title, then we have our advanced settings. So this is, you might want a subtitle for your podcast. This podcast really is the best. Next, this is if you want your website URL, the copyright, and then your actual time zone. So then you've got your author settings. Again, this stuff's publicly available on your feed. And yeah, we recommend using your brand name and your main contact address. Because again, this is like, going back to what I was saying before, this stuff is, this stuff is important because this is how directories and browsers read your information. The more information you've got in there, the better. Yeah, so then again, you've got content, so whether something's episodic or serial, you've got your language, and then your content rating, which is, like I said, try and keep it clean, because even if it's a couple of swear words, it's, you don't have to say it's explicit just for a few swear words, really. I don't think you can get away with it. And it's going to be better for you in the long term. So next we have distribution. So this is kind of, you know, this is like the most important bit really, like where's your show going to live? Where are you going to get it to? You know, how people are going to discover it. Like obviously you guys are probably, you know, being sumo lings, I'm guessing you're kind of quite active marketing people. You know, you're going to have websites, you're going to be driving your traffic to your website. My recommendation is always funnel, use like kind of social media to funnel traffic to your landing page, get people engaging with your podcast episode, with your player episode on your landing page, get them to have a really compelling CTA, get their email off them, and then you kind of created the life cycle of that user, and you can kind of marry it all up and kind of begin to understand that kind of user a bit more. So at this point, do you want to manage it yourself or distribute my podcast? I would recommend clicking distribute my podcast, because then we handle this all for you and we put it in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Acast, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, Breaker, and Stitcher. And we'll have more, you know, more directories coming on here as we kind of do more partnerships. If you have any directories that you think we should be in that we're not currently listing on here, by all means, drop an email to appsumo@podcastco and let us know. You can also go on, I think it's feedback.podcast.co or podcast.co/feedback. I'll confirm it at the end, I'll double check it. And there's feature suggestions and stuff, so you can go there and make suggestions as well about things that we should do. Generally, how we approach product development is we tend to, you know, listen to what users are saying to us and then base our feature development on demand from the actual feedback form itself. Yeah, so you can choose, but you can choose to do this completely yourself if you want. Also on this page, you've got your podcast RSS feed, you've got your player. So this is player settings. So this is basically a show player. So this, if say I had 10 episodes, this would have all my episodes listed in it, and I could share that. I can style it here. I can choose the dark theme. I can pick the highlight colors. I can choose whether the corners are rounded or square. I can choose whether to allow downloads or not, whether to allow sharing or not, or whether to allow subscriptions or not. Now, I guess if you're doing a private podcast network, you probably want to turn all of these off. But for most people, you're going to want all of these settings on. And like I said, you're going to get all of your episodes in here. Or you can go back, and if we go to our schedule one, you can get your player embed there. So you can choose to have an episode. So let's say you've got a landing page for a specific episode, you're probably going to want to use that. But then if you've got like a home on your website for your podcast, you might want to use this player. And next, last thing, I'll show you the subscribe button. So again, this can be really easily embedded. Now at the moment, this is just showing RSS feed because I've not done any of these. I'm not in any of these directories yet. But once you do, you have this subscribe button here, and it looks really cool because you basically hover over it and it just creates a drop down and it shows you all of the places. So that's a really handy button to just embed onto your site. And again, you can change the text color. You can ignore this background. This isn't there when it's embedded. It's just literally the button. And you can choose to have the dark theme or light theme, change your color, do it however you want. And then like I said, once you hover over there, you have all of your episodes. And then next, we have our page. So we've got our title, we've got our artwork. I'm going to upload some cover art now quickly. So again, zoom it in and out, crop it, whatever. Click save. Then you've got your title here. You've got fields to populate, your Twitter, your YouTube, and your Instagram usernames. You can style this page as well. Dark theme, light theme, you pick the highlight color. You can have page level information, whether you show the title or whether you show the download, whether you allow downloads. And then lastly, you can add in your Patreon and your PayPal donate button links here. So if you add your links here, they'll show up on your page. So if I click this, we'll go through to an actual landing page. Now, that's a kind of example. So this would then, let's say if I had this in loads of other directories, it would have Google, Apple, etc. And they would all kind of be in here in this drop down. I've got our share functionality here, how people can share it. It's pulled in our episode information here, but then obviously we don't have any episodes here yet because I've not published mine. So if we go back, and what we'll do is we'll override this and we'll just publish it now. We'll make it public straight away. Bang, so we've got our episode now. Excellent. You can choose to send it back to unlisted if you did that by mistake. And you can still edit stuff when it's live as well, by the way. So if you ever need to go back in and change your description, like I said, you know, when you're thinking about your descriptions, put your SEO cap on, because this stuff is important. You do need to think about it, in my opinion. Right, now, Zoom is covering up the box so I can't move. Okay, thank you, Zoom. Okay, so now, if I do a refresh, it should show my episode. Alternatively, what I'll do is I'll show you a client. I'll show you a client's page, actually, because they're actually, you know, we have some pretty cool clients, and they have some pretty cool content. So this is IFL TV. So these guys, basically, one of the biggest boxing channels on YouTube. And what we do with that is we take their YouTube channel and we turn their YouTube videos into podcast episodes. So these are all, you know, so they do a lot of episodes. So if you're into boxing, you probably know who Eddie Hearn is. It's like, you know, Tommy Fury. These are kind of like all the biggest names in boxing, basically, that are on this show. So yeah, so these are their social links. This is their subscribe button. So you can see this is the place where all of their podcast lives in all these different locations. And then they've got all their episodes. So again, you can share, choose to share that, click through, and then you have your episode. So this is their specific episode. And again, they can choose to share that. And sorry, and if I click back, it takes you back to their homepage. I'll show you another client as well. Who else should we go with? Let's go with, have a look at Lowdown, which is another nice page. So this is a marketing agency who we work with. So they're like, I mean, they do kind of a range of stuff. They do PR, marketing, and digital, as you can see here. PR, marketing, and digital, indeed, I was right. Okay, so yeah, so they do a kind of interesting podcast where they go around talking to entrepreneurs. You know, like, you know, some pretty successful people like this guy, you know, in this episode, it's basically about Net World Sports. So Alex Lovan, he's one of the richest guys in Wales, and he's only like, I think he just turned 30 this year. It's a really, really interesting podcast. Gets big numbers, this podcast as well, because they're talking to really interesting people all the time. And so obviously, yeah, you can choose to play, you can choose to download the episode, you can choose to share it with either the direct link or like that, straight to social. And so I think like that might almost be it, you know. I think I've taken you through a lot of stuff. I know I've touched on probably quite a lot of things, and I've probably brought up some stuff that's like not necessarily platform related. Like I said, if you've got questions about how you launch and grow a podcast, how you get viral with a podcast, let me know in the questions. I'm happy to answer as much of that stuff as possible. And I'm going to turn screen share off now, and I think we're going to jump into the questions.
Awesome. No, that was great. Thank you for going through all that. Okay, one of the questions that popped out is about when you're choosing your category, when you're getting set up. You mentioned something about only the first one you choose is the most important, or how would you recommend first three? Okay. So how does that work, and how should people be thinking about that? Is it worth doing more than three, or, you know, is it? Okay.
No, free. Yeah, I mean, you can do it. It's worth it in a sense of like all this stuff's pulled into your RSS feed. You know, it's all getting read by search engines. So Google Podcasts is the one directory that's different to the other podcasts, other podcast directories, sorry. So like everyone else, you submit to them. Whereas what Google does, Google crawls your information you have in your podcast, the more that Google can read it. So there's no harm in having multiple categories, but it's only really Google that are going to see past the third category. My opinion, you want to try and game your categories as much as possible. This stuff is important. Like gaming the categories is how you, if you've got a new podcast, right? So as an example, if you've got a podcast that's been around for 10 years and you've got 1,000 episodes, on places like Apple, and a podcast that's a week old with one episode that gets a big load of numbers is going to go much higher than a podcast that's much older with big numbers, if that makes sense. So the kind of time scale, the tight time scales are really important. Now, if you're doing a podcast that's in the business category, that's, you know, there's a lot of podcasts in there. So if you can game one of those subcategories and get to the top of that, it's going to be easier for you, basically. So you're going to get more eyeballs on your podcast when you launch it.
Got it. So you want to try to find a category that has kind of the least amount of competition, but that's still accurate to what your podcast is. Like you wouldn't want to be doing a business podcast in like a food and wine category, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
Yes.
And then you want those to find the order or to set that order. You really just do it for what are the first 3 that you select when you're signing up on Podcastco.
Yeah. And then we'll send that, and then we send those categories to all the directories, basically. So when you then do your submissions and you select, you know, unless they do it themselves, but if they select, I want you guys to submit my podcast, then we send all of that information over for them. I mean, that's the benefit to having us do it, is that our system automatically publishes that for you. Whereas if you choose to do it, then you've got to go and manually do it.
Yeah. And can you change your category after you launch?
Yeah, you can do. Yeah.
Okay. Is that like a worthwhile strategy? Like starting off in a very niche category and then adjusting it once you've kind of captured some traffic?
It is potentially. Yeah, this is it. Like, you know, it's about finding an audience, isn't it? Like the good thing about podcasts is, you know, you get your niche, you get your your focus, you understand your audience, you grow a really engaged kind of audience. It doesn't have to be huge, it has to be engaged. Then if you then flip it out to a higher category, by that point you can bring that audience with you and their friends, then you're going to definitely kind of rank your podcast a lot higher.
So you could kind of like level up niche after niche, going from like kind of like a Russian nesting doll type situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. The other question is, in terms of, I know you said there's different types of episodes you can do. So you can do like trailers, or I guess it was like promos, and then full episodes. Why would you, apart from like knowing that you can do those different ones, is there any strategy or reason for doing one versus the other, doing a certain combination or sequencing of them?
Yeah. So trailers are the most, like, if you've not got a podcast live yet, get a trailer. Like put your trailer out first, because, you know, that basically helps with the turnaround. It helps, you know, it logs in all the directories. Whereas if, say, you get your trailer, then your podcast live in all the places it needs to be then. So then you can start focusing on your episode 1. It's okay, I'm going to launch now. I'm launching my first episode. So all your focus is on that. Obviously, podcast episodes don't necessarily go live the minute you hit publish on every directory. So in a way, you're better off having a podcast established through the trailer. We know it's listed in all the places, and then you can focus your marketing strategy on driving people to that first episode when it goes live.
And how much time between putting a trailer out and having that first episode? Because I also wonder, like, does that count towards, like, you know, the new and noteworthy categories if you just put out a trailer and then it's kind of like the clock ticking on that where you want to start getting episodes out?
Yeah, I say like a kind of probably 2 week max. 1 week to 2 weeks is the kind of the sweet spot, I think, that you want to be aiming for. You get your trailer live, you have your activity on social, you bring your audience, as much as your audience as you can, to episode 1.
And would it make, and you're saying it makes sense to put that trailer out first, then kind of recording a couple episodes and a trailer, and then launching like the trailer plus episodes like 1, 2, and 3. So there's
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, actually, in terms of production, actually, so like on the other side to hosting and distributing podcasts, we actually do produce podcasts as well. So we work with quite big sports agencies and stuff like that. So we tend to work with clients and try to get them to batch record content. I think batch recording content makes sense.
Yeah.
It depends on how many episodes you're putting out. If you're putting one episode out a month, cool. If you're doing one a week or one every 2 weeks, it is easier to batch, because what you want to do is you want to get ahead of your content schedule. You want to try and get, like I say, we tend to try and work 2 months ahead on stuff with clients. So we might have 2 months worth of episodes planned. We'll record and produce them, start distributing them. And then whilst we're doing that kind of release schedule of 2 months, we're working on the next 2 months. So we're always 2 months ahead of where the audience are going to be. The only time that can change is if there's some like time specific content that happens in an industry. Like in certain industries, things just happen and change. So then suddenly an episode, like with sports, that can happen a lot. So suddenly an episode, it becomes no longer relevant, even though we've been sat on it waiting to release it. And then by the time it's ready to be released in a month, it's like, oh, that's got to change now because something fundamentally has changed in this industry. Like someone's been signed to some team or whatever. So, but generally I think with like entrepreneurial type shows where, you know, a lot of those kind of things, it's about interviewing people. It's about telling interesting stories. That kind of stuff's quite a lot easier to plan actually. So we work with some pretty cool tech companies as well. That kind of content's much easier to plan. But yeah, I would say if you're launching, you're going for launch, you want your trailer and your first 3 episodes kind of ready to go at once, regardless of what that time scale is that you're releasing on.
Yeah, cool. And
sense?
Then, what have you seen in terms of like length of episode? Is there anything you would recommend? Like, is there a big benefit to doing 20-minute episodes versus hour and a half? Like you were saying, Rogan's 2, 3, 4 hours.
It depends, right? So like, I think there's a sweet spot. Like personally, I listen to shorter podcasts personally. Yeah. But that's just me. I think it kind of has to be determined by your kind of business, you know, so like for Sumerlings, it's about what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve. But this is kind of how you could use bonus content in an interesting way. So let's say you have the full on Joe Rogan hour-long interview type thing. Yeah. You got that's episode 1, that's going out. Then you've got episode 2 going out. That's like another full on hour-long episode. But what happens to those people that aren't going to listen to that full hour? Well, you might as well take that episode, chop it up into like 5-10 minute segments and release that as bonus content in between episodes.
And so is bonus content like an actual category on the podcast app?
It would just come into the podcast basically, yeah. And it would just list differently. It just lists differently. So like when you're in Spotify, it says trailer, episode, bonus.
Got it. So I imagine what you could... Basically. What was that?
It's like a tag, if you know what I mean.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the way to think about it.
Would one strategy be like, say you were doing an interview podcast and say you landed like a bigger guest than you would normally expect? I feel like a way you could take advantage of that is record a full episode with them and then afterwards maybe do like a bonus content, or maybe you just like break down the top 10 lessons in say like a 10-15 minute clip out of that 40-minute interview.
Exactly. Yeah. That, you know, you can use bonus content really cleverly. You know, there's a lot of smart stuff that you can do with bonus content actually, you know, to engage an audience between an episode. Like you say, yeah, it's either little insights that you can get access to. It's additional bits. It can be outtakes. Sometimes like with comedy podcasts, outtakes is always a good one for the bonus content, you know, bloopers and stuff. So yeah, I think you can definitely use bonus content to keep your audience engaged in between episodes.
And can you have multiple trailers or just one? Because I'm also thinking on the reverse side, if you had a big interview coming up, could you release a trailer for that specific episode, or would that make more sense as like a bonus content, or is that just a weird thing to do?
That would be bonus content. I don't think there would be a reason you couldn't release multiple trailers, but I think you would probably release it as bonus content.
Yeah.
I would recommend bonus content. It might be detrimental, actually, if you release multiple trailers. Possibly not.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Because I feel like that could be a way maybe to do like audience-generated questions or something like that before you record. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Let's see what are some other questions. Okay, what happens if somebody is on a different platform using podcasts and then they want to switch to Podcastco? And then on the flip side, what would happen to somebody's podcast if they're on Podcastco and then switch to a different platform down the line?
So basically, we make it really, if people want to switch in, they just import their existing RSS feed. We then generate a new RSS feed and basically update all of their directory links if we're doing it for them, or we give them the feed and they then go and update all of their directory links themselves. I think for most people, one of the benefits of using Podcastco is the fact that they can, you know, get us to handle those directory things for them, because it can be a bit confusing sometimes for people. If people want to move away from Podcastco, then we just basically we unlock the feed for them, and then they can go to whatever platform they want to go to, and then basically go through the same process they would as if they were coming here from another platform. So it's really easy.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
What's a recommended cadence you would have in terms of publishing episodes? I think that's just all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends, doesn't it? Like, I think 2 weeks. It's got to be like, I'm interested in marketing. Like, I do marketing. Yeah. So I'm listening to that kind of stuff. I think most of the stuff that I listen to is on a 2 week basis.
What, two a week or one every 2 weeks?
One every 2 weeks.
Got it. Okay. I got it. Okay.
Yeah. But you know, I mean, like, you know, some people do daily podcasts, right? You can do the flash briefing. I mean, this is another trick that you can use. So like, you can do your podcast 3 minutes long every single day, record it, distribute it, get it out there. And you know, the good thing about that is you can sort of, this is a kind of hacky way of growing an audience there. You basically in the Alexa skills store. And there's a whole bunch, you know, the way that I'm saying you can game the categories on the Apple Music, on the Apple Podcast Store. You can completely game things like Alexa skills, because there's like only 5,000 Alexa skills in the world. Nothing. It's like it's a massive open goal there. So, you know, you can get your podcast on Alexa as well. There's all these kind of things you can do to like gain an audience. Like we do this actually. We do a daily podcast where we read podcast headlines, because we know that people are interested in podcasting. You know, even if they're not necessarily wanting to be a Podcastco customer, they want information about podcasting. So we put out a daily podcast called the Podcastco Daily. And now if you go into the Alexa skill and you type podcast, we come up. You know,
that's awesome.
There's little tricks like that you can do.
Yeah, no, that's one thing I saw Ryan Holiday doing is he has the Daily Stoic website, and then he does like a daily newsletter, which is just like 2 paragraphs. And then he also has a podcast where just reads the newsletter that he's sending out. And so they're like 3 minutes, but you're just recycling and reusing the same content you already created and just giving it to people in multiple mediums to consume it.
That's it. We're big believers in this. This is exactly how we work with clients on production. So what we do is we record the podcast as an audio file. We record it as a video file. It then gets distributed to YouTube. It gets distributed to all the podcast platforms. We then pull the audio clips from it and build social assets from it. And then we pull the video clips from it and build video assets for it. And then basically from one episode, and then we run the transcripts and pull social media posts and blog posts from that. So from like one hour recording, you end up with like a podcast episode, a YouTube video, 5 to 10 audiograms, 5 to 10 like video clips that you can use, a blog post, you know, a whole bunch of bits of copy that you can use for your tweets. And it's basically, it's like a system. We've got loads of content in our on the site on podcastco/content. If you head there, we've got loads of these kind of tips and tricks. We try and publish as much of this stuff as possible for people. There's, you know, absolutely reuse, repurpose. That I'm 100% a believer in repurposing stuff as much as you can. Yeah,
you can just create that surround sound effect where people, like you said, you make this one piece of content, but everywhere people go, like maybe they're not checking their podcast every day, maybe they're not checking Facebook, but they're on YouTube and they see it pop up there, and then that just you know, creates all this organic marketing around that. That's awesome.
And it's touch points on people's journey. That's it. You're hitting every touch point. They could be on Instagram looking at something. They could be on Twitter. They could be on YouTube, wherever. But wherever they could be on Google writing a query into it. You know, and as long as you've got your transcript there in your blog post, you know, then you're going to hit all of those touch points for that user.
Yeah. And I like the idea of doing a daily episode, because I feel like at first that can sound super intimidating. You're like, I'm not going to do it every day. But if they're only 3 5-minute episodes and you just batch record them like once or twice a month, you just sit down and you're like, okay, here's 10 tips that I think are super cool. And you just put those together, record them, and now you splice them up and you're good to go. Like it seems to be a lot less intimidating than, hey, sit down and record an hour-long podcast about some topic. Like that's really intimidating.
Yeah, it is. 100%. I completely agree. I mean, like we did it. The reason the flash briefing that we do, the daily podcast that we did that as a campaign test. We ran it for 30 days. So we just did it internally. So if you put Alexa into the content section of our site, it should pull up a long form article which talks about how we did that, the whole process we went through, how we got it onto Alexa, all this kind of stuff. And so I think, that'd probably be really useful for people. But yeah, I completely agree. Like that's so much easier, right? To just record something in 3 minutes. It's just, I'm literally, I'm on my commute. I've got some thoughts in my head. I record them into my phone. Bang, it's done. It is. You just got to start somewhere. That's like it's like creating a business. Like
or like I like the headlines idea that you said. It's like you could be on your commute, be like, crap, I have to record a podcast today. Open up whatever it is, like a startup's website or a marketing website, see what people are talking about. And now you can, like, if you're in that field, you should easily be able to create 5 minutes of content or just like your opinions on what's going on. Tesla just released, the new Cybertruck. Like this is either a great decision or a bad decision. Are you going to get it? It's just like, it's that easy. Like what are the water cooler conversations you're having at your office and just record it.
That's it, 100%. Just tap into kind of what's already happening. Like we always talk about piggybacking in here. Like that's something we think is really good to do. Like it's piggybacking off other people's audiences. So that's why you have guests on your podcast, because you piggyback off their audience.
Yeah. I was talking to a Sumoling the other day who runs a digital agency, and he actually said this is how he's acquired so many clients. Is he'll go to a conference or he'll hit somebody up and be like, hey, can I record a quick interview for you on my podcast? It'll be like 15, 20 minutes. He does the podcast, like researches them very intensely beforehand. And then afterwards, he's like, hey, would you mind staying on? And then he just pitches them after. He's like, hey, we just talked about your business. You said you're looking to do a bit more on the social media. My agency has actually done this with a dozen clients before. Is this something you'd be interested in? And now it's a great lead gen because everyone wants to be on a podcast. Like, you're just going to give me free promotion? Okay, like easy.
Exactly. That's it. I mean, we do this as well. We have a podcast that we use for business development, and it's a really good way of approaching people. And actually quite a lot of our clients do this as well, because what you're doing, it's a lot like kind of an easier sell in a way. You're giving people an experience. So for us, it's kind of an easy one because you give them an experience of coming on a podcast and like, I want to do a podcast. It's like,
you build rapport between the two of you as opposed to it just being like a hard, cold sales pitch.
That's it. Yeah. So I think it's a really, really good way of like starting conversations. And I think, there is a lot to be said for just doing it. And if you've not got a podcast, don't set yourself this big aim of like producing this incredibly well-crafted hour-long episode that sounds like it's been produced by Wondery, and it's like, that's a lot of work, man. That's a lot of work. Just get going, just do something. And like, there's loads of stuff you can do. Like one stat that I always think is interesting, right? There's 440 million blogs in the world. There's 23 million YouTube pages, and there's 750,000 podcasts. So that's like,
that's interesting.
It's very easy to get cut through in a less saturated marketplace. And at the moment, audio and podcasting is definitely a less saturated marketplace. So there's like a big open goal there, and you can just kick your ball straight through it, basically.
Yeah. What are some tips? Because I know we have a lot of like agencies, consultants, freelancers in our audience. What are some of those tips if you wanted to use a podcast as lead generation? Like one of the ideas that comes to mind is, say, like, I'm in Austin. I wanted to work with Austin food brands, like just creating a very niche podcast on like local Austin food brands and then reaching out to them that way. But like, how do you have any more like structure or strategy that would go into like how somebody who maybe like is really just getting started on the agency side is really looking to lock in some good client acquisition, like how they could use a podcast to support that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, like I said, guest management is, We have actually. I better not sort of talk. We have some stuff that we're going to be doing that will probably help with guest management later on. But like, yeah, kind of in the first instance, this is the thing about kind of how you approach guests is really easy. So we have like just templates. It's just template email, and it's basically, you know, you've got 100 leads there. Like, okay, so it's food in Austin, right? So who do I want to be engaging with there? There's suppliers I might want to engage with. There's people that running food nights that I might want to engage with. There's businesses, to established physical restaurants I might want to engage with. So you build your list, you build your spreadsheet, you know, get it up in Google Sheets, get all of your leads in there. You get your email template, you go out, you hit them all up, you get your process together. Guest managing is actually really easy to do, but you need to sort of rely on other tools. So a good thing that I always think is using Zapier, Google Sheets, and Calendly. Those three things are really, really good way of actually managing guests, engaging people, bringing them on board. You know, you can see them as though you're being a lot more responsive. Ultimately, if you're launching a business, there's obviously lots of different places to spin at once. So as much automation as possible that you can use for getting guests in. And generally, like I said, guests, you know, approaching people to be on a podcast. No one says no.
Yeah.
No one says no to being on a podcast. Everyone wants to promote themselves. So one thing I would suggest is when you do outreach on people, think about them. You know, don't pitch to them about why they should come to your pitch, about why you want to tell their story to a bigger audience. So always think about the person you're pitching to. And yeah, rely on tools. I don't think we have a guide for this yet, but we are working on a guide for how you can use Zapier, Sheets, and Calendly for basically managing your guest booking in a kind of really automated workflow. We'll probably get that done quite soonish. In fact, I'm going to write a note down to make sure that gets done soonish, because I think it'd be useful for Sumo Links in general.
Yeah. So are those templates going to be available, or are they already available?
Yeah, they will be. Yeah. If they're not already available, they will be available. Basically, most sort of things that we do internally to grow our business, we tend to sort of do openly on the blog as well. So we give,
and that's podcastco/content.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We publish pretty much all of our strategies there for how we grow business, how we engage people, how, you know, and sometimes you just got to do things, you know, like it's an interesting kind of time, but like everyone's interested in podcasting. If you're selling podcasts, it's, you know, depends on what you're trying to sell really. And at the moment with podcasting, it's very easy to sort of start conversations with people, obviously.
Yeah. So what would be the best resource? Cause we're coming up on time. What would be the best resource for somebody? They buy, 1 code, 3 codes, 1, 2, or 3 codes on AppSumo. And they're like, I kind of have a general idea of what I want to do. Like maybe it's something in business, maybe it's something in finance or whatever, how they can kind of narrow down what that is and then kind of go through that checklist process to get everything done. Like where would you direct those people?
So again, go to content, /content on the podcast website. We have a lot of stuff. We have some basic courses to get. We have something called the crash course to get started. If you go to /crash course, that's like a 4 video series that you can do. Really simple. I'd also recommend going to /blueprint. That's like a 60-page PDF that covers every single element of how you go from an idea in your head to something on paper to something that's coming out of speakers.
Awesome. Very cool.
That stuff's really useful. Like I said, a lot of these templates are available. The guest booking system that we use isn't currently available, but we'll make that available kind of soon. We'll try and get that out in the next couple of weeks.
And that'll be available included in this deal for Sumo Links?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll ping it out to Sumo Links.
Oh, that'd be great. Very cool. I'm sure they would love that. Awesome. Well, that is all I have for now. I don't want to take any more of your time. Do you have any final things you wanted to say before we sign off?
Off the top of my head, no. I think I've covered most of that. Actually,
we got a lot. Yeah.
I just need to double check. Can you just bear with me 1 second?
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Sumo how are we doing? Are you guys getting a lot of value out of this? What have been some of the best things that you have learned in the on this podcast webinar? Yeah, not a podcast, maybe a podcast. We've actually been playing around with the idea very loosely of doing an AppSumo podcast, but we have not gotten close to kind of narrowing down what that would look like. So if you guys have any ideas, shoot those over to us. Let us know what would be interesting. Like, would you want to hear more interviews with founders and companies? Would you want more strategic insights? Would you want to hear interviews with people at AppSumo and kind of hear what we're working on? Yeah, shoot those over to us. Shoot them over to me. You can always reach me. Just Chris Shelzy at appsumo.com. That's going to be a tough one to find. Or just write into support@appsumo.com. And let's see, do we have any other questions in here? Okay, cool. We got a question about monetizing a podcast. Once Mike pops back on, we can ask him that one before we hop off. Yeah, this was really interesting. I really agree with what Mike was saying, and I want to explore that further, because I think a lot of people love podcasts, but are also intimidated about starting one on their own, because it does feel like you listen to those, like you said, those Wondery podcasts and all that, gets real intimidating. But what's up, Mike? I got you.
Was there a question about monetization?
Yeah, I just gotta. Looks like you might be private. Can people see Mike? Let me know. Somebody said that you might be in a private mode. Let me see if I can make let me know. Can y'all see Mike? Still nothing? Yes, we see him when he speaks. Okay, cool. Looks like you're back on. I'm
back. Okay, cool, great. Okay, so was there a question about monetization?
Yes. Someone wanted to know, how do you provide a service for podcasters? And how would somebody monetize a podcast? And is there anything that Podcastco does to assist that?
Yeah, we on your actual pod.co page, so pod.co/your podcast, we have the ability to add Patreon buttons and PayPal donate buttons. So you can funnel people directly to there and take donations. One thing that we recommend is actually sponsorships. Like, the important thing is know your audience, know who you're selling to, and then get an engaged audience. It doesn't need to be a huge audience, but it needs to be a relevant audience, and then pair that up, with a relevant business, basically.
What size?
I think sponsorships.
How many downloads would you want? How many downloads would you recommend, or what's a metric that someone should go by as a baseline for, like, at this point I should or shouldn't monetize?
Okay, so I would say 1,000. If you get 1,000 regular listeners that are engaged and you know who they are, and you're in a very specific niche, that's enough to go out there and get some form of deal. When you're then kind of getting into the higher numbers, most brands are kind of looking for about 5 to 10,000 downloads per episode before they'll start. These are kind of like Harry's type thing, yeah?
Yeah.
They're kind of common. Squarespace, Harry's, like all these. There's a lot of American companies. There's like the top 20 American companies. There's like Pillow.com or whatever, bed sheets. Okay. This is all like the kind of big American companies.
Yeah.
These guys all want to see between 5 and 10K.
Okay.
What you can do. Currently, we don't have any ad insertion on pod.co. Like, we'll see how that goes in terms of us developing that. But what you can do yourselves, like Sumolings, is go out there, if you've got the numbers, go and speak to Harry's. As soon as you've got 5K an episode, go and speak to Harry's. Go and speak to the top 10 podcast advertisers in the US and broker a deal direct and cut your adverts into your podcast. The good thing about that is you're taking all of the revenue. We're not going to be taking a cut of that. And even if, later on we do some sort of advertising, if you've got static ads that edited into your episode, they're your adverts basically. So you own that advertising, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think you're looking for 5.
Let me run this idea by you, because I've never done a podcast, but listen to a lot of them. What if for like, before you were able to actually earn those sponsorships, what if you just like ran them for say you reached out to a guest to interview and they were a company owner, and then you're just like, hey, I'm offering free sponsorship on my podcast if you're a guest, and then you do a little pre-roll ad for them for free. And then at least you're kind of creating this illusion that you are a sponsored podcast. It benefits the guest. It could help you with sales. And then down the line, that could help you close better podcast paid deals. It's like doing free work for somebody.
That's a really smart idea. Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, go steal that, Sumo.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely go and steal that. Like, there's no, like I said, you gotta fake it till you make it, haven't you?
Yeah.
Everyone does. That's how you
like
grow.
This podcast is brought to you by Google. Like, Google didn't have to pay you for you to say that.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. That's it. Yeah, 100%. And it's actually, it's probably a nice engagement for people as well. Like I said, no one turns down the opportunity to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So did you have,
I think that's a really
one
good
last
idea.
thing you wanted to walk folks through?
So the guest booking system, we're going to get that set up as a long form article for people. We'll mail it out to Sumo links especially. It'll go out to everyone anyway, but if you're not on our mailing lists, we'll send it specifically to the Sumo links. One thing we've had some feedback from people regarding the amount of data people might need. So what we've looked at is applying bolt-ons of 1 terabyte. So if you need extra data, we're going to offer bolt-ons of 1 terabyte for $15 per month, which we think is quite reasonable. I mean, give us feedback about this as well. Like, we're happy to sort of work with you guys. Like, ultimately, this is a community thing. So definitely give us feedback. But we're thinking $15 for 1 terabyte. And the other bit of feedback we had is about transcripts and audiograms and whether we can allow people to have that functionality. So we're going to be offering that at $10
what is an audiogram
as well as a bolt. An audiogram is essentially it's basically just an audio clip, and it has a waveform and an image, and it's basically like a social kind of audio clip that you can post. Now,
awesome.
There's ways to do this as well. There's lots of if you were to type free audiogram into Google, a lot of places will come up where you can also do free audiograms. So don't feel like we're sort of doing this to help people. If you feel like it will be useful for them to have it inside the application, we want to make that available to them. But don't feel like we're not holding you to this. You can go and produce audiograms on plenty of places on the internet. Sell this to you at all. It's like, we're totally cool with you doing that as well.
Awesome. Great. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time on here. I had a lot of fun. This is a great product. I'm really looking forward to checking it out a bit more. Sumo Links on here. Thank you guys for joining us on this Monday morning. Again, Podcastco is available right now on AppSumo, starting at just $79. I think we walked through a lot of great options for you guys. If you've never even thought about starting a podcast, how you can pretty easily do that, probably a lot easier than you thought possible. And Podcastco is there to support that. So definitely recommend you guys checking it out, heading over to appsumo.com/podcastco and checking it out, grabbing a code. Again, it's all backed by the AppSumo 60-day guarantee. So get that first podcast episode launched, send it over to us, post it in the comments so we can check it out. And if you have any other questions, you can reach out to us on the Podcastco deal page. I'm sure you can also reach out to the Podcastco team directly and get any other questions answered you might have. Mike, any last things to say?
No, just some of those URLs again. Podcastco/blueprint. That gives you a blueprint for how to go from idea to page to speakers. Podcastco/crash course. Again, four video, sort of getting you going kind of guide. Podcastco/content and help.podcast.co. They're the four things you're going to need. And AppSumo at Podcastco if you need to send us a message about anything.
Awesome. And that's it. Mike, thank you so much. Really appreciate you hopping on. And one question that just popped up. When are those bolt-ons going to be available?
I think we should have them done in the next 2 weeks.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. Very cool.
We work in sprints, so definitely in the next 2 weeks we'll have them available for you. But we'll send everyone a message to let them know.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate you, Mike. Have a great day. Thanks for hopping on. And
Very
Sumo,
much.
have a great
Cheers.
week as well. Happy Thanksgiving
Well,
to everybody who's celebrating too. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.